Emperor Vexthor stood on the highest balcony of his palace and looked out at the 3 galaxies he ruled. His golden scales caught the light from 7 different suns. He was the most powerful being in known space. His people, the Zephyrians, had built cities on 1,000,000 worlds. They could move mountains with their minds and bend space itself to their will. But right now the mighty emperor was scared. A loud crash came from somewhere deep in the palace. The floor shook under his feet. A few seconds later he heard another sound that made his heart sink. It was the sound of his 3 baby dragons crying. The babies were not actually dragons. They were Zephyrians like him. But everyone called the young ones dragons because of how they looked. Baby Zephyrians had small wings, sharp teeth, and could breathe fire when they got upset. They also had powerful minds that could do things even adult Zephyrians found hard to control. Vexthor's children were named Keth, Zara, and Nyx. They had hatched just 3 months ago. At first everything seemed normal. They ate their food, slept most of the day, and made cute little chirping sounds. But then they started growing, and with growth came power. The problems began 2 weeks ago. Keth had a bad dream and accidentally opened a hole in space. The hole sucked in half the furniture in the nursery before Vexthor could close it. The next day, Zara got hungry and her crying shattered every window in the east wing of the palace. Then Nyx tried to follow a butterfly and walked through 3 solid walls like they were made of air. Since then, things had only gotten worse. 17 of the best Zephyrian childcare workers had tried to help. All of them were now in the hospital. Some had burns from baby fire breath. Others had been caught in small time loops when the babies played with reality. One poor woman was still stuck halfway between dimensions after Nyx hugged her too hard. Vexthor had tried to calm his children himself. But whenever he came near, his own powerful presence seemed to make them more excited. They would try to copy his abilities, which usually ended in disaster. Yesterday, all 3 babies had tried to move a mountain like Daddy. They moved it all right. They moved it right into the middle of the palace courtyard. The emperor walked down the long halls toward the nursery. Servants ran past him carrying buckets of sand to put out small fires. Others held strange tools to fix holes in reality. The palace looked like a war zone. He could hear his babies crying louder now. It was not the normal crying of upset children. When baby Zephyrians cried, their voices could be heard across space itself. Right now, 3 nearby planets were probably wondering what that strange sound was. Vexthor reached the nursery and stopped at the door. Inside, he could see his 3 children. They were about the size of ponies now, with beautiful scales that changed color with their moods. Right now, their scales were dark red and purple, which meant they were very upset. Keth was floating near the ceiling, too scared to come down. Every time he moved, small lightning bolts shot from his wings. Zara was curled up in a corner, and the air around her was so hot it was hard to breathe. Nyx was half invisible, flickering in and out of sight like a broken hologram. The room itself looked terrible. The walls were covered with scorch marks. Several pieces of furniture were floating in the air, frozen in time bubbles. In one corner there was a small black hole that was slowly eating a toy box. Vexthor felt his heart break. His children were not being bad on purpose. They were scared and confused. Their powers were growing faster than they could understand them. Every time they got upset, their emotions made their abilities go wild. And the wilder their abilities got, the more scared they became. He had to find help. But who could help with baby Zephyrians? His people were the oldest and most advanced race in the galaxy. If Zephyrians could not handle Zephyrian children, who could? The Emperor called his chief advisor, Chancellor Crix. Crix was old and wise and had helped solve many problems over the years. "We need outside help," Vexthor told him. "Contact the Galactic Childcare Consortium. Tell them we need the best specialists they have." Crix looked surprised. The Galactic Childcare Consortium was a group that helped different alien races take care of their young, but Zephyrians had never needed outside help before. "Are you sure, Your Majesty?" Crix asked. "What will people think if they know the mighty Zephyrian Empire cannot handle 3 babies?" Another crash came from the nursery. This time the whole palace shook. In the distance they could hear the sound of breaking glass. "I do not care what people think," Vexthor said firmly. "I care about my children. They are scared and hurting, and I cannot help them. Send the message to every advanced race in the galaxy. Tell them the Emperor of the Zephyrians is asking for help." Crix bowed and hurried away to send the messages. Vexthor looked back at the nursery door. Inside, his babies were still crying. Their voices echoed through the palace, through space, and probably into the dreams of sleeping people on distant worlds. He did not know it yet, but help was coming. Not from where he expected and not in the way he imagined. Sometimes the best solutions come from the most unlikely places, and sometimes the most powerful beings in the universe need to learn from the smallest and weakest. But that would come later. For now, all Vexthor could do was wait and hope that someone, somewhere knew how to help 3 very special, very powerful, and very upset baby dragons. The first ship to answer Emperor Vexthor's call belonged to the Mindari. These aliens were tall and thin with pale blue skin that seemed to glow. Their heads were huge because their brains were 3 times bigger than most other creatures. The Mindari were famous throughout the galaxy for being able to read minds and talk without using words. Master Quillen led the Mindari team. He was their best child expert and had helped raise the young of dozens of different alien races. Behind him came 11 other Mindari, all dressed in flowing white robes. They moved like they were floating, their big eyes looking at everything with calm intelligence. "Do not worry, Emperor," Master Quillen said, his voice echoing inside Vexthor's mind rather than through the air. "We have studied the minds of young beings for thousands of years. Your children simply need proper mental guidance." The Mindari team set up their equipment outside the nursery. They had strange crystal devices that hummed with energy and machines that looked like giant metal flowers. Quillen explained that they would use telepathy to calm the baby dragons' minds and teach them control. "We will create a peaceful mental space," Quillen said confidently. "Your children will learn to find inner quiet. Their powers will become focused and controlled." The team joined hands and closed their eyes. Their equipment began to glow brighter. Vexthor could feel their combined mental power reaching out toward the nursery. It felt like a warm, gentle wave of peace and calm. For a moment, everything went quiet. The crying stopped. Even the small fires in the hallway seemed to dim. Vexthor felt hope rising in his chest. Then something went very wrong. The peaceful mental wave hit the baby dragons and bounced back like a ball thrown at a wall. But it did not just bounce back. It came back twisted and wild and 100 times stronger. The babies' untrained minds took the Mindari's calm thoughts and turned them into a storm of confusion and fear. Master Quillen's eyes snapped open and he screamed. Not with his voice, but with his mind. All 12 Mindari began shaking. Their careful mental shields, built over centuries of training, cracked and broke like glass. The crystal equipment exploded in showers of sparks. The metal flower machines melted into puddles. Quillen fell to his knees, holding his huge head in his hands. "Impossible," he whispered, but now he was speaking out loud because his telepathy was broken. "Their minds are like storms, pure chaos. No pattern, no order. How can children be so random?" The other Mindari were crying. Some were laughing. One was trying to talk to a wall, convinced it was his mother. Their great minds, so used to order and logic, could not handle the wild, unpredictable thoughts of upset babies. The Mindari team left that same day. As their ship flew away, Quillen was still muttering about impossible chaotic resonance patterns and the failure of all known mental science. The next day, the Kethval arrived. The Kethval were masters of technology. They could build machines that folded space, computers that thought faster than gods, and tools that could fix almost anything in the universe. Engineer Prime Zendal brought a team of 50 technicians and enough equipment to fill 3 cargo ships. "The problem is simple," Zendal announced, adjusting his metal suit. "The children lack proper environmental controls. We will create a space where their abilities cannot cause damage." For 2 days, the Kethval worked. They filled the nursery with humming machines, floating screens, and devices that made reality more stable. They built force fields that could stop a starship, time loops that would slow down accidents, and computers that could predict what the babies might do next. The nursery looked like the inside of a spaceship when they were done. Every surface had blinking lights. The air hummed with the sound of advanced technology. Floating screens showed charts and graphs of the babies' power levels. "Perfect," Zendal said, looking at his work with pride. "Now the children cannot hurt themselves or anyone else. Our machines will contain any problems and teach them proper control." For exactly 7 minutes, the plan worked perfectly. The baby dragons were fascinated by all the new toys. Keth poked at a floating screen with his nose. Zara breathed a small puff of fire at a humming machine. Nix tried to hug a force field generator. Then Keth discovered that one of the time control devices was fun to play with. He figured out how to make it go backwards and forwards. Soon the corner of the room was stuck in a loop where the same 10 seconds kept happening over and over again. Zara found a reality stabilizer and decided it looked tasty. When she bit it, it opened a doorway to another dimension. Strange purple light poured through and everyone could hear what sounded like alien music from the other side. Nix got excited by all the activity and let out a happy squeal. But baby Zephyrian squeals are very loud and very powerful. Every computer in the room overloaded at once. Screens exploded, machines caught fire, and the force field started turning on and off like broken lights. Engineer Prime Zendal ran around trying to fix everything. But for every machine he repaired, the babies broke 2 more. His team of technicians followed behind him, looking confused and defeated. "They are treating our advanced technology like toys," Zendal said in shock. "They have no respect for the complexity of our engineering. How can such young minds figure out our system so quickly?" The Kethval gave up after their reality stabilizer opened 3 more doorways to other dimensions. As they packed their broken equipment, Zendal kept shaking his head and muttering about impossible learning curves and the failure of all technological solutions. On the 3rd day, the Eternal Ones came. The Eternal Ones were the oldest beings in the galaxy. They had existed since the first stars were born. They were tall and thin, with skin that looked like it was made of starlight. They moved slowly and spoke in voices that sounded like distant music. Sage Mordan led them. He was so old that he remembered when the galaxy was young. Behind him came 6 other Eternal Ones, all looking wise and peaceful. "Young Emperor," Mordan said, his voice echoing like wind through mountains. "Your children do not need control or containment. They need wisdom. They need to understand their place in the cosmic order." The Eternal Ones sat in a circle around the babies and began to teach them about meditation. They spoke of inner peace, cosmic balance, and the harmony of all things. Their voices were so calm and beautiful that even Vexthor felt relaxed. The baby dragons listened quietly. Their eyes grew heavy. One by one, they fell asleep. Mordan smiled with satisfaction. See? They simply needed to learn proper spiritual discipline. But baby Zephyrians do not sleep like normal children. When they dream, their minds wander through space and time. And when 3 powerful baby minds all start dreaming at the same time, strange things happen. Soon, everyone in the palace was sharing the same dream. They were all being chased by giant cosmic butterflies while falling through an ocean of soup. The dream was so vivid and so strange that people woke up confused about what was real. The Eternal Ones found themselves dreaming about their own childhoods, which had happened billions of years ago. Mordan woke up crying about a pet star that had died when the universe was young. "This is not possible," he whispered, his ancient wisdom shaken. "How can such young minds have such power over dreams and reality? We have meditated for eons, and yet these children can bend space itself while sleeping." The Eternal Ones left quietly, still confused about their childhood memories and muttering about impossible cosmic forces and the failure of all spiritual wisdom. One by one, every advanced race in the galaxy tried and failed. The crystalline hive mind got their shared thoughts scrambled. The energy beings had their frequencies disrupted. Even the great machine minds overheated trying to understand baby logic. Emperor Vexthor watched each group leave with growing despair. If the most advanced, most intelligent, most powerful beings in the galaxy could not help his children, then who could? He did not know that the answer would come from the most unlikely place of all. After watching the galaxy's most advanced beings fail one by one, Emperor Vexthor sat in his throne room feeling hopeless. His beautiful palace was half destroyed. His children were still crying in their nursery, their voices echoing across space. Every day brought new accidents and new damage. Chancellor Crix approached carefully. The old advisor looked tired and worried. He had been trying to find help for weeks, but every expert had either refused to come or left in defeat. "Your Majesty," Crix said quietly, "I have contacted every major race in the galaxy. The wisest minds, the most advanced technology, the oldest wisdom, all have failed. But there is one more possibility." Vexthor looked up with faint hope. "Tell me." Crix shifted uncomfortably. "There is a young race called humans. They have only recently learned to travel between stars. Most species consider them primitive. They have no telepathy, no advanced technology, and their minds are simple compared to others. But they do have one thing. They run childcare services for their own species and for some of the newer colonies. The Emperor stared at his advisor. You want me to hire primitives? Beings who barely qualify as intelligent life? I know how it sounds, Crick said quickly. But we have tried everything else. What do we have to lose? Another crash echoed from the nursery, followed by the sound of reality tearing. Somewhere in the palace, alarms began ringing. Bexthor closed his eyes and thought of his children. They were not getting better. If anything, they were getting worse as their powers grew stronger. Every day they stayed upset was another day they learned that their abilities brought fear and pain. Send the message, he said finally, but send it quietly. I do not want the whole galaxy knowing that the Zephyrian Empire had to ask humans for help. Far away, on a small space station near Earth, Jake Martinez was having a bad day. The pediatric ward was understaffed, 3 kids had chicken pox, and 1 little girl kept making herself invisible every time she got scared. Jake had been working double shifts for 2 weeks, and he was exhausted. Jake was 32 years old with brown hair and kind eyes that had seen too many sick children. He had been a nurse for 10 years, first in Cleveland Children's Hospital, then in the space colonies when his family needed more money. He was good at his job because he genuinely liked kids, even the difficult ones. His wrist communicator beeped with an incoming message. Jake almost ignored it. He got too many messages from hospitals looking for nurses. But something about this one made him look. The message was short and strange. Urgent childcare position available. 3 subjects, ages 3 months. Exceptional pay. Immediate start required. Warning, subjects have special abilities. Previous caregivers unsuccessful. The pay amount made Jake's eyes widen. It was more money than he made in 5 years. With that much, he could pay for his sister's medical treatments and maybe even take a vacation. He sent back a simple reply. I'm interested. What kind of special abilities? The response came back quickly. Telekinesis, reality manipulation, dimensional phasing, pyrokinesis, and other psychic phenomena. Subjects are non-human. Location, Zephyrian Imperial Palace. Jake stared at the message. The Zephyrian Empire was famous throughout human space. They were powerful aliens who ruled 3 galaxies. Why would they need a human nurse? But the money was real. Jake checked. The advance payment had already been transferred to his account. His sister could start treatment next week. 2 days later, Jake found himself on a rickety human transport ship heading toward the center of the galaxy. The other passengers were traders and diplomats, all looking nervous about visiting the mighty Zephyrian Empire. Jake had packed light, just his medical kit, some clothes and a few items he always brought to new jobs, a children's picture book about friendly dragons, a small music player with lullabies, a stuffed animal that looked like a teddy bear but with 6 legs, a gift from a grateful alien parent. When the ship reached the Imperial Palace, Jake felt very small. The palace was bigger than most space stations, floating in space like a golden jewel. Ships the size of cities moved around it like tiny insects. A shuttle came to pick him up. The pilot was a young Zephyrian who kept staring at Jake like he was some kind of strange animal. You are the human? The pilot asked in accented English. That's me, Jake said cheerfully. Jake Martinez, pediatric nurse. The pilot looked confused. You look so unsmall, and you have no psychic abilities at all? Nope, just good with kids. Inside the palace, Jake felt even smaller. The hallways were huge, designed for beings much larger than humans. Everything was made of crystal and gold, and artwork from 1,000 worlds decorated the walls. Chancellor Crix met them at the landing bay. He was tall and elegant, with golden scales and eyes like liquid amber. He looked at Jake with barely hidden disappointment. You are the expert they sent? Crix asked. I'm a nurse, Jake said simply. I take care of children. Crix led him through the palace, explaining the situation as they walked. Jake listened to stories of failed Mindari telepaths, exploding Kethval technology, and confused Eternal Ones. He heard about reality tears, time loops, and shared nightmares. Every advanced race in the galaxy has tried and failed, Crix said. The children are becoming more upset every day. Their powers grow stronger, but their control grows weaker. They reached the nursery. Jake could hear crying from inside. Not normal crying, but something that made his bones vibrate and his teeth ache. Through the doorway, he could see scorch marks on the walls, floating furniture, and strange lights. Wait here, Crix said. I will announce you to His Majesty. But Jake was not listening. He was looking at the 3 baby dragons huddled in the corner of the room. They were beautiful creatures, about the size of large dogs, with scales that shimmered between red and purple. Their wings drooped with exhaustion, and their movements were jerky and uncoordinated. Jake had seen that body language 1,000 times before, not in alien babies but in human children who had been through trauma or illness. The way they held themselves, the way they flinched when anyone came near, the way their cries sounded less like anger and more like desperate calls for help. "When did they last eat?" Jake asked suddenly. Crick stopped in surprise. "They are fed every 4 hours by automated systems. Their nutrition is perfectly calculated. What about sleep, playtime? Do they have toys? Do they get held and cuddled?" Cricks looked confused. "They have everything they need. The finest food, the safest environment, the most advanced care." Jake nodded slowly. He was beginning to understand the problem. Everyone had been treating these babies like dangerous weapons that needed to be controlled. But they were not weapons. They were just scared, overwhelmed children who happened to have incredible powers. "I'd like to meet them," Jake said. "That might not be safe," Cricks warned. "They are very unpredictable." Jake smiled. It was the same smile he used with worried parents in the hospital. All babies are unpredictable. That's what makes them babies. He walked toward the nursery door, his medical bag in one hand and his stuffed 6-legged bear in the other. Behind him, Chancellor Cricks and a growing crowd of palace staff watched in amazement and terror. Jake was about to do something that no one else had thought to try. He was going to treat the most powerful baby dragons in the galaxy exactly like what they were: babies. Jake stepped into the nursery and stopped just inside the doorway. The room was a disaster. Broken machines lay scattered on the floor. Scorch marks covered the walls. Several pieces of furniture floated in the air, trapped in time bubbles. In one corner, a small black hole was slowly eating what used to be a toy chest, but Jake ignored all of that. His attention was focused entirely on the 3 baby dragons in the far corner. Keth was pressed against the wall, his scales dark with fear. Small sparks jumped between his wingtips every few seconds. Zara was curled into a tight ball and the air around her shimmered with heat. Nyx kept flickering in and out of visibility, like a television with bad reception. They were all crying, not the angry roars that everyone expected from dragons, but the tired, desperate sobbing of exhausted children. Jake sat down cross-legged on the floor, making himself small and unthreatening. He set his medical bag beside him and pulled out the 6-legged stuffed bear. "Hey there," he said softly, not looking directly at the babies. In his experience, direct eye contact scared upset children. "My name is Jake. I heard you guys have been having a tough time." The crying quieted a little. 3 pairs of large, golden eyes looked at him with curiosity. Jake began humming a simple lullaby his grandmother had taught him. It was an old song about sleepy stars and gentle moons. As he hummed, he made the stuffed bear dance slowly in his lap. Nyx stopped flickering and became solid. His head tilted to one side, listening to the unfamiliar sound. "This is Mr. Patches," Jake said, holding up the bear. "He's very good at making friends with babies. He's also very brave. Want to meet him?" Keth drifted down from where he had been floating near the ceiling. He landed softly a few feet away from Jake, his sparks becoming smaller and less frequent. Jake continued humming and made Mr. Patches wave one of his 6 paws. Zara uncurled slightly and the heat around her began to cool. "You know," Jake said conversationally, "I've taken care of lots of babies. Human babies, Andromedan babies, even some crystal babies that sang instead of crying. They all have one thing in common." He paused and looked at each of the baby dragons in turn. "They all just want someone to understand them." Keth took a cautious step closer. Jake slowly reached into his bag and pulled out his picture book about friendly dragons. "Would you like to see a story?" he asked. He opened the book and began to read aloud. The story was simple, about a little dragon who was afraid of his own fire until he learned that it could be used to light candles and warm cold friends. As Jake read, he used different voices for each character. The baby dragons crept closer. By the time Jake finished the story, all 3 were sitting in a semicircle around him, their scales brightening to healthier shades of gold and green. "Again," Zara said in a small voice. It was the first word any of them had spoken in weeks. Jake smiled and started the story over. This time, when he got to the part about the dragon lighting candles, he asked Zara if she could make a tiny flame. She breathed out a small puff of fire, perfectly controlled, and her scales glowed with pride. When Keith showed interest in the pictures floating off the page, Jake asked him to use his telekinesis to turn the pages. Keth concentrated carefully and managed to turn each page without tearing it. When Nick started to flicker again, Jake asked him to play peekaboo by appearing and disappearing. Soon, Nix was giggling as he popped in and out of visibility. For the first time in weeks, the nursery was filled with laughter instead of crying. Outside the door, Chancellor Crix and a growing crowd of palace staff watched in amazement. Emperor Vexthor had arrived and was staring through the doorway with his mouth open. "How is he doing that?" Crix whispered. "He treats them like children," Vexthor said softly. "Not like problems to be solved or powers to be controlled. Just children." Inside the nursery, Jake was teaching the babies a simple game. He would clap his hands in a pattern and they would try to copy it. Keth used his telekinesis to clap blocks together. Zara made small puffs of flame in rhythm. Nix appeared and disappeared in time with the beat. "Good job," Jake said when they got the pattern right. "You're all very smart." The babies glowed brighter with happiness. It had been so long since anyone had praised them instead of fearing them. As the day went on, Jake established routines. He showed them how to play gentle games that used their powers in safe ways. He taught them that it was okay to feel angry or scared, but there were better ways to express those feelings than destroying things. When Zara got frustrated because a toy would not work the way she wanted, Jake helped her take deep breaths and count to 10 before trying again. When Keth accidentally moved something too hard with his mind, Jake showed him how to practice with lighter objects first. Most importantly, Jake was not afraid of them. Every other caretaker had approached with shields and barriers and fear. Jake simply sat with them, played with them, and treated their incredible powers as just another part of who they were. By dinner time, the babies were calm enough to eat properly for the first time in weeks. Jake fed them by hand, the way he would feed any upset child, talking to them gently about their day. "Tomorrow we'll practice more games," he told them as he tucked them into their beds. "And I'll read you another story. Would you like that?" 3 little heads nodded eagerly. Jake dimmed the lights and began singing a soft lullaby. One by one, the baby dragons fell asleep. For the first time since their powers had emerged, they slept peacefully without causing any accidents. Emperor Vexthor stood in the doorway, tears streaming down his scaled cheeks. His children looked happy and peaceful. The nursery, while still damaged, was quiet and calm. "How?" he asked Jake as the human gathered his things. "How did you succeed where the wisest minds in the galaxy failed?" Jake shrugged. "They're babies. All babies need the same things, no matter what species they are or what powers they have. They need routine, patience, and someone who genuinely cares about them." He looked back at the sleeping dragons. They weren't being difficult on purpose. They were scared and overwhelmed. Their powers were growing faster than they could understand them. They just needed someone to help them figure it out. "But the Mindari are telepaths," Vexthor said. "The Kethaval have the most advanced technology. The Eternal Ones have wisdom spanning eons. And all of that is great," Jake said. "But sometimes the most complicated problems have simple solutions. These little ones don't need their minds read or their powers contained or cosmic wisdom. They need bedtime stories, games, and someone who thinks they're wonderful just the way they are." Emperor Vexthor looked at this small, powerless human who had done what the greatest minds in 3 galaxies could not do. He thought about all the advanced theories and complex solutions that had failed. Maybe, he realized, the most advanced solution was sometimes the most basic one. Maybe the secret was not trying to control or fix or improve the children. Maybe the secret was simply loving them. 3 months later, the Imperial Palace was a different place. The halls that had once echoed with crashes and alarms now rang with the sound of children's laughter. The nursery, rebuilt and redecorated, was filled with toys, books, and 3 very happy baby dragons. Jake had become a permanent member of the palace staff. Every morning he would arrive at the nursery to find Keth, Zara, and Nix waiting for him with bright, excited scales. They had grown bigger and stronger, but also calmer and more controlled. Keth had learned to use his telekinesis to help clean up his toys. He took great pride in being able to stack blocks perfectly or move his food bowl without spilling anything. His scales now glowed a steady, peaceful blue most of the time. Zara had discovered that her fire could be used for art. Jake had taught her to breathe gentle flames to create beautiful light patterns on the walls. She could even warm up cold milk for her brothers without burning anything. Her scales shimmered with confident gold and green. Nyx had mastered his phasing abilities and used them to play the most amazing games of hide and seek. He could walk through walls to surprise his family, but he always asked permission first. His scales were bright silver, the color of joy. The changes in the baby dragons had not gone unnoticed. Word of Jake's success had spread throughout the galaxy faster than light speed. News reporters from 100 different worlds had come to the palace. Scientists wanted to study his methods. Philosophers debated what it meant that a primitive human had succeeded, where advanced races had failed. Emperor Vexthor found himself in an unusual position. At first, he had been embarrassed that his mighty empire needed help from such a young species. But as he watched his children flourish under Jake's care, embarrassment turned to respect, and respect turned to genuine admiration. "Jake," the Emperor said one day as they watched the children play in the palace gardens, "I owe you an apology." Jake looked up from where he was helping Nyx practice appearing and disappearing on command. "For what? I thought humans were a lesser species, primitive, barely intelligent." "I was wrong," Jake smiled. "You weren't completely wrong. We are pretty new to space travel, and we don't have telepathy or super technology, but we've spent our whole history raising children in dangerous, unpredictable situations. We got good at it because we had to." In the garden, Keth was using his powers to make flower petals dance in the air, while Zara provided gentle, warming light to help them grow. Nyx was playing tag with a group of young palace servants, carefully phasing through walls without scaring anyone. "They're not the same babies that were destroying the palace 3 months ago," Vexthor observed. "They're exactly the same babies," Jake corrected. "They just needed someone to help them understand their gifts instead of being afraid of them." The Emperor nodded thoughtfully. "The galaxy is very interested in your methods. The Galactic Council has asked me to share your techniques with other species." Jake had already heard about this. His small success had created waves throughout known space. Races that had struggled with their own difficult children were asking for help. The Andromedan tadpoles who kept accidentally eating their schools. The crystalline spawn who sang so loudly they shattered their own homes. The energy-being juveniles who couldn't control their electrical output. "I've been thinking about that," Jake said. "What if we started a training program? Bring human nurses and teachers to work with different alien species. Not to replace their own methods, but to share what we've learned." Vexthor's eyes lit up. "You would do that?" "Why not? Every child deserves someone who understands them." That evening, Jake sat in his quarters working on lesson plans. He was designing a curriculum that would teach aliens the basic principles of human childcare. Patience, consistency, the importance of play, the power of routine, how to see past difficult behavior to underlying needs. Most importantly, he wanted to teach them that every child, no matter how powerful or different or alien, was still just a child who needed love and understanding. A soft knock at his door interrupted his work. Jake opened it to find all 3 baby dragons standing in the hallway with Emperor Vexthor behind them. "We wanted to say goodnight," Keth said in his improving English. "And thank you," added Zara, "for making us feel safe." Nyx finished. Jake knelt down and opened his arms. All 3 babies rushed forward for a group hug. Their scales were warm and smooth, and they smelled like starlight and growing things. "Sweet dreams," Jake whispered. "I'll see you tomorrow for story time." As they walked away with their father, Jake heard Vexthor ask, "What story will Jake read tomorrow?" "The one about the brave little star," Zara said excitedly. "No, the one about the friendly space whale," Keth argued. "Can we have both?" Nyx asked hopefully. Their voices faded as they disappeared around the corner, but Jake could still hear them chattering happily about tomorrow's stories and games. 6 months later, the first class of the Human Childcare Training Program graduated. 25 beings from 15 different species had spent 3 months learning human techniques for understanding and caring for children. The graduation ceremony was held in the palace gardens. Jake watched with pride as his former students received their certificates. There was Healer Zix from the Andromedan system, who would return home to help with the tadpole problem. Engineer Kayla from the crystalline homeworld, who had learned that sometimes the best solution was the simplest one. Even Wise Neth from the Energy Being Collective, who now understood that power without empathy was just chaos. Emperor Vexthor gave a speech about the importance of learning from other species, no matter how different they might seem. But Jake was only half listening. His attention was focused on Keth, Zara, and Nyx, who were playing happily with a group of alien children whose parents had come for the ceremony. The baby dragons were teaching the other children their games. Keth showed a young Mindari how to move objects gently with thought. Zara helped a shy crystalline child learn to control their singing volume. Nyx taught everyone how to play interdimensional hide-and-seek. They were no longer the scared, out-of-control babies Jake had first met. They were confident, happy children who used their incredible powers to help and play with others. As Jake watched them, he realized something important. He had not changed the baby dragons at all. He had simply helped them become who they were always meant to be. And maybe, he thought, that was the most important lesson of all. Sometimes the best way to help someone is not to try to fix them or control them or make them different. Sometimes the best way to help is simply to love them, exactly as they are. The sun was setting over the palace gardens, painting the sky in shades of gold and purple. Children of a dozen different species played together under the watchful eyes of their parents and caregivers. The sound of laughter echoed across the space between worlds. Jake Martinez, a simple human nurse from Cleveland, had helped change the galaxy. Not through advanced technology or cosmic wisdom or telepathic powers. He had changed it through patience, kindness, and the radical idea that every child, no matter how powerful or alien or different, deserved to be understood and loved. And in the end, that made all the difference.